2019 article published by The Guardian, Adam Roberts, professor of 19th century literature at Royal Holloway, University of London, asked how science fiction and, in general, fiction related to future imageries could help to save all of us from concrete. The article in question, in fact, is part of a column of the newspaper dedicated to the right information, also with regard to the negative externalities of this kind of material, on concrete architecture. And from the author's words emerges how the ideas and the narratives around concrete are frequently related only to the past, like something that is not aligned to contemporary sensitivities, such as eco-sustainability and architectural and urban designs with less impact on the environment. Essentially, when someone thinks about the future, it is not unusual for concrete to appear as a scenographic element, that is, the protagonist of environments connected to negative aspects, among ruins belonging to previous structures built with this material, and urban spaces which refer to what was done with concrete architecture in some key periods of the 20th century, often linked to dictatorial regimes. A famous example among many is certainly 1984 by George Orwell, within which the political and social ideal of the dystopian dictatorship in which the events take place is described as follows. The ideal set up by the party was something huge, terrible, and glittering. A world of steel and concrete, of monstrous machines and terrifying weapons. A nation of warriors and fanatics marching forward in perfect unity, all thinking the same thoughts and shouting the same slogans, perpetually working, fighting, triumphing, persecuting. 300 million people, all with the same face. The reality was decaying. Dingy cities where underfed people shuffled to and fro in slinky shows, in patched-up 19th century houses that smelled always of cabbage and bad lavatories. The way we imagine the future is inextricably connected to what, in the common sense, concrete represents. So much so that it is not unusual for it to be associated with concepts such as desolation or dystopia in narratives and imaginaries that exacerbate the consequences of anthropic impact on the earth, starting from the Industrial Revolution and dealing with the aesthetic legacy of regimes such as the fascist or the Soviet one. According to Jan Essman, cultural memory is formed by all that set of meanings assumed by facts, places, and rituals that go beyond their practical functions. When mimetic routines take on the status of rituals, for example, when they assume a meaning and significance that go beyond their practical function, the borders of mimetic action memory are transcended. Rituals are part of a cultural memory because they are the form through which cultural meaning is both handed down and brought to present life. The same applies to things once they point to a meaning that goes beyond their practical purpose. Symbols, icons, representations such as monuments, tombs, temples, idols, and so forth, all transcend the borders of object memory because they make the implicit index of time and identity explicit. And talking about how concrete is connoted in narratives relating to the future is an excellent starting point to talk about the difficulties behind processes of protection and enhancement that develop around cultural heritage in reinforced concrete, which also lead to reflection on how circumvent certain problems that lurk both in the perception of this kind of heritage that often struggles to emerge as something of cultural and historical value in the common sense by local communities, and in the collective and cultural memories, since concrete architectures have often become physical supports of historical memories with a great impact from a social point of view, as, for example, happens in Italy with the architecture designed by Pier Luigi Nervi, by many still connoted as works acclaimed and advocated by the fascist regime. Within the narratives about urban spaces, the theme of the need for an elusive return to nature within anthropic environments emerges more and more frequently, and the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic has been a catalyst for this kind of reflection, so much so that, as stated by Carla Pampaloni and Lorenzo Brocada, a feature inherent in the essence of the metropolis becomes so evident to be a permanent home to forms of wildness, however completely neglected. Although the incursion of the wild into the city is not an exceptional phenomenon, its repetition during the first lockdown has taken on new forms, at least from a metaphorical and perceptive point of view. As has already been noted, the invasion of non-domestic animals in cities desertified by the health emergency has been welcomed as a further manifestation of the irruption of nature into daily life, in addition to that linked to the worldwide spread of an unknown virus. Reinforced concrete structures have entered into these reflections, both aesthetically and poetically, and in the collective imagination they are often associated with glorifying scenarios where flora and fauna find their own spaces, commonly to the detriment of the integrity of previous buildings. From other points of view, however, cultural heritage in reinforced concrete represents sophisticated products of human intelligence, also at the base of extremely positive contemporary re-evaluations, as happened, for example, with brutalist architecture. In fact, they constitute the supports of other forms of cultural memories linked to the past and to practices that deserve to be remembered for what they represented from the point of view of technique and history of architecture, but present memory as well, pitched towards the future, where spaces, buildings, and monuments are constantly resignified and reinvented by the communities of reference, which reappropriate them both symbolically and practically. Indeed, in the architectural and urban planning fields, reflections and practices aimed at the reuse and revaluation of abandoned industrial spaces have been launched since the 1970s in order to return them to the communities of interest, and frequently transforming them into spaces devoted to cultural and artistic practices.